Hello, everyone. I'm talking today with the new Australian High Commissioner to India, Barry Farrell. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Thank you, PAWAN. It's great to talk to you and through you to people back home.
Now, you took office not so long ago, and we know you've been very, very busy. Has it been a trial by fire?
Well, it seems like a lifetime ago that we arrived on the 18th of February, because that was 3 weeks before lockdown. I arrived, we had a ministerial visit by the Minister for Trade and Investment, a big delegation. So my first full week was travelling around the country with Minister Birmingham and his team, and it was terrific to see the interest again of Australian businesses and the response in India. After that, life started to take on a normal pattern, where I was meeting my diplomatic colleagues and various people in the bureaucracy of India. And then we had janitor curfew, which was the trial as to whether in a democracy this size, 48 times the population size of Australia, whether people would stay indoors if asked. And as in Australia, we found that they would. And the next night, we've been in a lockdown for the last 36 days. So it has been a baptism of fire, but as you know, PAWAN, there's nothing like a crisis to increase your learning curve.
And bring out the best in you.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but I do look forward to one day being able to go more than to the bank or to the grocery store.
Right.
It'd be nice to go to a museum, go and have a look at the fort again, or some of the other wonderful cities across India.
I promise you'll travel to the Taj Mahal soon, and hopefully with your loved ones, so that'll be great. But Barry, just coming back for the thousands of Australians who were either holidaying or working in India, the Indian government's decision to announce a shutdown with little notice caught them by surprise. While some of them have found their way back to Australia, thousands are still stuck there, and as you said, 36 days and counting, with little idea of how long before they can get back to their loved ones in Australia. Can you share with us what is the situation for the thousands of Australians trapped in India at the moment?
Well, it continues to be difficult. To be honest, we were negotiating with airline companies early in the piece, and a number of those companies weren't interested because of the challenges involved. The long travel distance, the fact that you can no longer transit through some of the traditional spots like Singapore and the like, concern industrially by some of their crew about potentially being exposed to people with the COVID-19 virus. And so we had a couple of false starts where companies that we were progressing negotiations with backed out. Then we had a terrific group here in India called Australians in India, run by Simon Quinn, put together a number of charter flights to which the High Commission and the staff here were all involved, because we have to lodge the flight papers, we have to get the movement passes approved to enable people to move from their homes to the airport. So, and then this week we've had 4 Qatar flights leave Chennai, Mumbai, Delhi and Kolkata, and link into their normal services from Doha into Australia. So over the 10 flights, almost 3,000 people returned. But that's still about half of the numbers that we have. The good news is that Qantas will be providing 3 flights from Delhi between the 7th and the 10th of May next Tuesday. Next Tuesday, I think it is the 5th, or Wednesday. A privately organised charter will be going also from here. So there is movement. We're not sure how long these charters and these Qantas flights will continue. Any more than we're sure. Well, I'll come back to that. Any more than we're sure about when the international and domestic flight bans here in Sydney, in India, are going to be lifted. We've all lived in about the flight bans ending immediately. I don't believe they'll end next week. I see in today's Indian papers that they're talking about a gradual return of domestic flights. But the issue here is that the government can only do what the government's able to do. 3 flights out of Wuhan was the government's contribution there. We know the number. We know the numbers here are greater. There have been more numbers out here, but these flights are organised and approved ultimately by the Australian Border Force, and they ultimately depend, because of the Australian government's quarantine restrictions, on the ability of cities to have the accommodation facilities available to provide that quarantine. If I can send a message to you through this forum, PAWAN, to those people who are listening or may see it, who have family here, there's a couple of important points I'd like to reiterate, which is we get lots of requests to go to specific cities. We can't choose which cities they go to. Australian Border Force do that in cooperation with states and territories on the basis of which cities are able to accept those numbers and put them in the hotels to ensure that Australia's quarantine rules are in place. Secondly, I get lots of requests here in India because, as you know, we only have 4 posts in India. We have the High Commission in Delhi, we have Consulate Generals in Calcutta, Mumbai and Chennai. We can't organise flights out of other cities across India because we don't have the staff who are necessary to help those flights get away. Airports here are locked down. You walk into Indira Gandhi International Airport in Delhi, it is like a ghost town.
I've seen the photographs.
The only people working are the Home Affairs staff from the High Commission, my team here from the High Commission, and the check-in staff. That's the sum, and of course the immigration staff. That's the total. So we can't run flights into Ahmedabad, into Bangalore, into Hyderabad, into some of these other cities we're being urged to, because we don't have the resources to make those flights work. Third thing I'd like to say is that I know India can be, when it is fully functioning, a difficult city to traverse by car. We have had people come to Delhi from Ahmedabad. We've had people come to Delhi from Hyderabad. We've had people come to Delhi from Calcutta to get on planes to go home to Australia. We can organise the movement passes where there are sufficient people. We even organise buses. We've had buses come from Amritsar quite regularly. It seems that I used to joke once upon a time when I was in another job there, Parwin, that I thought every Indian in Australia was a Gujarati because they always were running businesses.
You found the Punjabis, have you?
I'm now concerned that every Punjabi who wants to get back to Australia is wanting to come through the embassy. My message is that if people are prepared to travel, and I know some of these distances are great distances, but they're being travelled by some people who have successfully returned home, it is possible. So we will do everything we can to continue to assist Australians to leave India to get home. We clearly give priority to vulnerable cases. So we've had a number of particularly sad cases of people that have fallen ill while they're over here, that have had all sorts of illnesses that we always ensure get to the head of the queue when it comes to bookings. But after that, the High Commission has asked everybody to register with it. As soon as we know a flight is available from whatever city, we send notification of that flight via email to everybody. We send a booking link, and that gives them an opportunity to have those chances. And I think we'll be doing that in the next day or two in relation to those Qantas flights that leave Delhi to go to Melbourne and to Sydney in a fortnight.
High Commissioner, you mentioned earlier that you're not sure as to how long will these flights continue for. Can you give us a little bit more explanation on that?
Well, largely it revolves around whether Australia Border Force is able to have them. So we can't let a flight leave India until we know which city it's going to, until we know that that city has the quarantine facilities that Australia requires. And of course, flights are not just returning to Australia from India, they're coming from all over the world. So it is quite a complex task. It's being run back, the approval process for all that is being run back home. I understand there are a number of charter applications, more private charter applications there. We are hopeful of more flights coming, but all we can commit to at this stage is the one that leaves on the 5th of May, which is, I understand, already booked out, and the 3 that we're about to open up will be going to Melbourne and 2 to Sydney between the 7th and the 10th of May.
High Commissioner, in terms of if there's a large family traveling back, the cost of a charter flight may not have been what they budgeted for. Is there any assistance from the Australian government to help them fund this with the future promise to pay it back to the government?
There's some limited assistance available where there's extreme hardship, but you know, it is absolutely regrettable, and there is no doubt that we've seen the cost of flights are going up. There's no doubt that those who usually travel through the Middle East have noticed an increase in airfares. There's also the issue that because of the lockdown here in India, the planes coming from Australia can't return Indian citizens who do want to go back to India from Australia and help reduce the cost. So the cost is as it is, and regrettably, it's going to have to be borne. But we only have very limited assistance provided because, as you can see, the federal government's assistance is being directed inwardly into Australia to ensure that people who are losing jobs are supported, and that people who can be supported to stay in jobs are maintaining those jobs, because that's the best assistance they can provide.
Absolutely, but High Commissioner, like there are a number of Indian students and visitors who are stuck in Australia. The students contribute to the Australian economy when things are normal, but things are not normal at all these days. And now these students are not very far away from being houseless. They are getting food from the local Indian community. Now the government has rolled out $130 billion for the JobKeeper and the Job Seeker facilities, but the students seem to have fallen through the cracks. Some of the universities are helping out, but not enough. Can the Australian government do more to help the students who obviously are a big long-term revenue earner for the Australian economy, more at this time when they need this help?
A big issue, PAWAN. I've been talking to university vice-chancellors over the last 2 weeks about this issue because, of course, both High Commissioner Sama in Canberra and I recognise the stress it causes on both sides of the Indian Ocean, the families back here, the students there. And I do know that the Australian government has provided a significant funding package to Australian universities in the order of $100 million. And I also know that the Australian universities are providing up to $110 million in assistance for international students, including Indian students. So, for instance, I was talking to the Vice-Chancellor of Macquarie University only this week, who advised me that as soon as the lockdown occurred, as soon as the flights and the jobs started to go, they had emergency vouchers for both financial support as well as food support for their overseas students there at Macquarie University, that they have relief grants of up to $2,000 for students who get into financial distress. I know from, as we saw 2 days ago, the Victorian government has announced grants of up to $1,100 for overseas students in its states, and I suspect you'll start to see more of that across the country. But I do know that just like through the bushfires, the Indian diaspora from all communities, all parts of that community, have also been doing what they always do, whether in bushfire crises or in these crises, which is open up hands, take people in and support them. And that's the way we do it in Australia. It's the way clearly Indians have done it forever, and we're grateful for that as well. But can more be done? Obviously more can always be done. But the people who are making those priorities, PAWAN, are now back in Australia, making those decisions as best they see it. And I have to say, taking a broader non-personal perspective, Australia seems to be progressing pretty well. And so hopefully as we see the battle with COVID won, we'll start to see equally the battle around the economy start to also be won, which will create the jobs, create the revenue that will solve the problem long term.
Your Excellency, now just moving tack a little bit, you are no doubt aware of the diplomatic row which has broken out between Australia and China, with China threatening to boycott Australian exports and withdrawing their students from Australian universities. As Australia's top diplomat and trade advocate in India, what would you be doing to push for more business with India post-COVID-19?
Well, 2 things, PAWAN, if I may. So Prime Minister Modi was instrumental in having the G20 leaders have a virtual summit about a month ago. And Prime Minister Modi at that virtual summit raised the issue of reform of the World Health Organization. And I think the call by Prime Minister Morrison, the call by Foreign Minister Payne for a independent international review of the World Health Organization is sensible. After a pandemic of this magnitude, it's only prudent that the world reflects on how it's been managed and how we can ensure that the next one, because there always is a next one, can be mitigated and fought for better than the last one. And so the idea of having a international review at the right time, not whilst people are battling this this terrible disease, but when we've got through that, to determine the genesis and spread of the disease, how different countries have dealt with it, whether the information has been adequately shared between countries in trying to deal with it, and finally, the role of the World Health Organization as the global effort to battle the crisis has unfolded is absolutely critical. So I think what's being asked for, whether by the Indian Prime Minister or by the Australian government, is a sensible outcome that I'm hoping will ultimately be done. But let's move on. What are we going to do to grow our trade and investment between India and Australia in the post-COVID world? Well, firstly, that's been the subject of a brief conversation between our two Prime Ministers earlier this month, and they both agreed to have a virtual summit next month. And we're currently looking for dates around that where both of them committed themselves to working collaboratively together to shape the post-COVID world, which of course involves commerce and trade, but particularly do so in the Indo-Pacific, where both of our countries are very keen to have a free and open society, to have states that are trading and prosperous and not being affected by authoritarian issues or raw politics. And so we're very keen to pursue this path. Yesterday, I was in a webinar of Zoom meeting with India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal, with other diplomats, and he made very clear that India would continue to seek to trade with its friends around the world. And I have to say that during this crisis, India has shown its capacity, not just the cleverness of using the lockdown to ramp up the health system by increasing the number of beds, hospitals, facilities, personal protection equipment and the like, but also in turning railway factories into producers of equipment for holidays, companies like Mahindra, which are now producing ventilators, a whole range of national and private sectors have coalesced towards converting their energies on providing the medicines and health equipment required to battle this terrible disease. And India has then, around its neighbourhood, taken an active role in providing that equipment to countries within the SAARC region. And of course, you would have seen in Australia that every country, including Australia, has requested everything from paracetamol to face masks to HQL or HCQ. I was never good at science, PAWAN. I was never good at science, and I certainly can't produce a name. But Minister Goyal said yesterday that was an example of the logistical supply chain that India was capable of in the crisis, how much better it could do post-crisis in growing its economy and the opportunities that would create for people, not just in Australia, but of course around the world. What I'm delighted about, PAWAN, is that I have in the Prime Minister, in the Foreign Minister and in the Trade Minister, three people who are absolutely committed to growing and deepening the India-Australia relationship, who want the Indian economic strategy to become a reality, because we understand the benefits it will provide to communities on both sides of the Indian Ocean. Economic growth creates opportunities, opportunities creates income creates higher aspirations, which are for the Indian community starts around education, and then the world is their limit. So we're all looking to do it. Is it going to be harder? Yep. I think it'll take a while to get things going again. I talked to you before we did this about how modern technology that has been sitting on the shelf and used to some extent may change and shape the way in which we do business and politics and diplomacy in the future. one of the points Minister Goyal made yesterday, which I've reflected on overnight, is that he believes that world leaders have never been in more close contact than during this current crisis. And how have they done that? They've not done that by flying into Washington or into Canberra or into London. They've done that by phone calls. They've done that by Zoom, Zoom or video links. And no one's done it better than Prime Minister Modi, who does seem to be a touch superhuman, because in addition to running a pandemic reasonably successfully, I've got to say, he's also found time every other day to pick up the phone to world leaders.
And also, I know that you've been doing excellently well yourself for social media. You've been using it very effectively, Your Excellency, and it's getting the message out quite well. Also, I want to congratulate you on your love for Nehru jackets. I can see you're wearing one for us today. And also,
it beats wearing a full suit. And as soon as I realised that it meant I didn't have to wear a tie, I was delighted.
Now, before I let you go, a very, very difficult question, and I need you to focus on this quite closely. It's a well-known fact you're a cricket tragic. Two important events on the calendar this summer, the T20 World Cup and the Virat Kohli match under the lights, which is promised against Smith, Warner, and all the other cricketers. Now, applying your love for cricket and your skills as a former politician and now diplomat, how do you see it all playing out?
So I'm slightly torn, PAWAN, because personally, I would like the Australian cricket team to move over here for 3 years and they can play against India every other day. Because I would certainly find time to watch that. But on behalf of Team Australia, on behalf of our national government and the people who love cricket across Australia, we will work very hard to try and ensure that the Indian Test Series does occur in Australia later this year. I don't know whether I can commit to the T20 World Cup. We at least saw the women's version of that, and what a great final that was. And we had a function here. Back when we could have function, we had functions here at the High Commission to watch that. And regrettably, my Indian guests were a bit disappointed at the end, but I did not gloat. Look, you know, one of the great things, I think there are two great things that help the Australia-India relationship. Firstly is the incredibly vigorous and vibrant and entrepreneurial diaspora across Australia. Almost, you know, more than 750,000 people who help Australians at all levels understand and appreciate what India has to offer. And of course, in so many ways, you open doors yourself for people that want to do business in India. And the second advantage we have is not the Commonwealth cricket curry. It's the cricket, because as I said in an interview yesterday that might get me into some trouble, PAWAN, but it won't be the first time I've been in trouble. I was asked who my favourite cricketers were, and I said, look, my vintage is that I still can't go past Lillee and Thompson, because when I was a teenager, they were going through cricket teams like hot knives through butter. And I said, my favourite Indian cricketer is Virat Kohli, because he's as good, I said, with the bat as he is with the lip. And I said, Australians love the fact that he's on the front foot, whether it's batting, or on the front foot, whether giving Australian batsmen and others a hard time. And like Tony Greig, who did much the same thing, I think Virat Kohli has not just because of his batting skills, but because of the way in which he plays the game, is vigorously taking not a back step, but has won his way into the hearts of Australians. Which is not to say that if we do get the tour underway, that I won't be hoping for Australia to win the Gavaskar Border Trophy. It's about time we had it back.
Well, I think you won the hearts of the 1.3 billion Indians and all the Indians in Australia by nominating your best player, Indian, I noticed. But in terms of between Australia and India, who would you nominate as your favourite player or your pick of the players?
Oh, look, I think Labuschagne, you know, who was only new, I think he has all the hallmarks of someone who, like a young Virat Kohli, we're going to be talking about for years to come.
Sounds fantastic. High Commissioner Barry Farrell, thank you for all the wonderful work you're doing, and thank you for giving us the time this afternoon.
Thank you, PAWAN. Anytime.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.